What Drury wrote in that ledger would still matter in Washington 37 years later. The Packard Twin Six idled at the zero milestone on July 7, 1919. The Lincoln Highway ran continuous to the Pacific, 81 vehicles staged on the mall. Mack trucks, white motor carriers, Dodge touring cars, Indian and Harley-Davidson motorcycles. A military band played from the steps. Dignitaries on the South Lawn watched what they believed would be a successful crossing. Sergeant Metzger eased the Packard forward and onto the Lincoln Highway corridor heading north out of the Capitol. The V-12 was quiet for its displacement. Power built for officers, not cargo. Drury opened his ledger and wrote the date. The paved surface ended 30 miles out of Washington. Macadam, then gravel, then compressed earth. Drury noted the transition. Mileage, time, surface grade. Old habit from France. Document the road before it changes you. Pennsylvania arrived in creek valleys and farm country. Wooden bridges over soft-banked streams. Their construction dates stamped into the timber. 1891, 1902, 1909. None of them had been built for the Mack trucks rolling toward them. A loaded Mack AB hit a Pennsylvania Creek bridge span and the timber gave. The truck fell to its frame rails in the gap. Drury wrote, bridge failure, horse load capacity only, mile 186. Incident number 1. The convoy detoured through a farm field. The farmer watching from his fence post, not speaking. The Packard's wheels left tracks in the clover. Mud from the shoulder came up onto the running boards for the first time. What Drury didn't know, what no one in the convoy had been told, was that Iowa had been under heavy rain for 4 days. The flood reports had reached Army Command. They had been filed without action. Iowa opened in flat black farmland. The Lincoln Highway here an unpaved section of compressed soil over clay. The convoy moved at 35 miles per hour on the dry sections, which were becoming fewer. Humidity pressed on everything. 3 days into Iowa, a white motor cargo carrier went to its axles in a section the rain had converted to mud. The road ahead was indistinguishable from the road around the stuck vehicle. The convoy stopped. Recovery required chains and hand winching in 4 inches of mud. 2 more vehicles sank trying to navigate around the first. By the time the road was clear, 3 hours were gone, and no one had thought yet about Wyoming. Drury wrote, road surface unsuitable for loaded military vehicle. He wrote it the way you write a fact you already know. In France, similar reports had produced fixes within 60 days. But France had been a war. The convoy fell 4 days behind schedule before crossing the Nebraska line. Drury's ledger showed the pattern: vehicle recovery, road failure, convoy halted. 11 times in 2 states. He had not yet written about Wyoming. Nebraska dried the mud and replaced it with dust. The Lincoln Highway through the center of the state was gravel at best, compressed earth at worst. The Packard's olive drab hood turned pale gray by noon, west of North Platte. The Lincoln Highway existed as a designation. The survey had been done from a light car on a dry day, recorded as passable. That was the standard, not a standard built for war. Wyoming rose in pale grass and rock shelves as the land climbed toward 6,000 feet. The Packard's V-12 pulled against thinner air, the rhythm slightly off. Metzger adjusted the mixture screw, and the altitude did not care. Above Laramie, the Packard misfired on hot restarts. Carburetor calibrated for sea level, running rich at altitude. Metzger adjusted the mixture screw at the roadside, engine ticking in the Wyoming morning. It helped, partially, between Laramie and Rawlins. The Lincoln Highway designation was a theory. The road stopped. Ruts through grassland took its place, and the Western Union telegraph line, running continuous west where the road did not, became the only navigation. That was supposed to be the worst of it. Wyoming roadless sections before Nevada, where the highway resumed on the maps. But the maps and the ground had stopped agreeing 200 miles back. Drury had noted it specifically. The convoy entered Nevada 9 vehicles already damaged. The road designation ahead optimistic on paper and unverified on the ground. Drury opened a fresh page in the ledger. What this road could do to a convoy had no precedent in any record he had kept. Before we follow Drury any further, if this is the kind of story you've been looking for, subscribe to the channel. Every video here is built a rail car, a real road, and a life that changed somewhere on the asphalt. No filler. If that matters to you, the subscribe button is how you tell us. And leave a comment. Have you ever driven a road that looked passable on the map but wasn't on the ground? Now, back to Nevada 1919. The Nevada Highway Corridor ran across Alkali Flat. Hardpan that looked solid at low weight and held. The convoy discovered its limit when the first loaded Mack crossed a section where the groundwater table ran near the surface. The crust gave without warning. The truck lessened one moment, buried to its front axle the next. The surface looked identical to the 50 feet before it. There was nothing visible from the cab to indicate the difference. August desert heat ran above 100 degrees Fahrenheit by 10 in the morning. Drury tracked it in the ledger. 103 degrees. 10:15 a.m. No wind. The Packard's black leather interior had been in direct sun for 2 days. The Packard's thermosiphon cooling depended on convection. Coolant rising to the radiator. Cooling, returning by gravity. At walking speed in 103-degree heat, the system failed. The coolant boiled at the block, and there was no pump to save it. Metzger shut the engine down on the open flat. They sat in the stop Packard for 2 hours, while the V12 cooled by natural convection alone. No shade. The canvas top the only cover between them and the sun. In Nevada's open sections, the Lincoln Highway had no physical form. The convoy navigated by the Western Union telegraph line, the poles the only marker across the flat. Drivers who lost sight of them stopped and waited. A Mack AB broke through where the groundwater ran near the surface, and the crust was thin. The truck sank to its frame rails. Front axle underground. Rear wheels still on the surface. White powder at the running boards. 20 men worked with shovels and chains in direct Nevada sun at 104 degrees. They rotated in 15-minute shifts before the heat required it. Progress was measured in inches at the frame rail, and the truck did not move. 4 hours in, Drury counted 15 vehicles stopped in the heat shimmer east of the buried truck. Engines off, men sitting in the shadow of cargo loads. The flat extended in every direction without a visible limit. The decision that would mean 41,000 miles of highway across this terrain was forming somewhere in this heat. The man who would sign it 37 years from now was in another stopped vehicle. Neither of them knew it yet. Drury stepped out of the Packard onto the alkali crust. It held under his boots. Officer's weight, not truck weight. The heat was immediate and flat. No wind. No differential between moving and standing. Just the sun. He watched the recovery. Shovels in white mineral powder. Chains under the buried axle. Men moving in rotation. Not a logistics failure. He was watching a military catastrophe in rehearsal in peacetime on his own country's ground. He walked back to the Packard and wrote for 12 minutes. Not what had gone wrong, but what would be required. Road grade, weight capacity, bridge ratings, drainage. The requirements column had been longer than the failures column since Wyoming. In a staff car 60 feet back, Lieutenant Colonel Eisenhower was also riding, 28 years old, West Point, a man who asked precise questions. Drury had spoken with him twice at camp. Eisenhower wrote the answers exactly as given. The Western Union telegraph line diminished to a point on the Nevada horizon, the only infrastructure on this section of the American West. No grade, no marker, no survey stake. Wire and poles and 100 miles of nothing. 4 hours, 40 minutes after it sank. The Mack was out. Jacked below, chained behind, engine at full power. It drove to the next solid section. The alkali flat ahead had not been tested. The convoy moved west at 3 miles per hour. Each lead vehicle testing the crust before committing weight. The vehicles behind following in the established tracks. Metzger watched the Packard's temperature gauge. The engine was holding behind the convoy. The alkali crust was destroyed. Wheel ruts punched through the mineral layer, white powder filling the channels, the surface unusable for anything lighter than what had already crossed it. The convoy had consumed its own road. The convoy camped 40 miles east of Reno. As August light dropped long and amber across the flat, 31 miles covered in 10 hours, 3.1 miles per hour average. Drury noted the figure without commentary. Drury wrote by oil lamp in the camp tent that evening, ledger on his knee for 2 hours. Not what had failed, what would be required. The requirements column had been longer than the failures column since Wyoming. Reno was 74 miles from where the truck had sunk, covered in 3 more days. A concrete main street, fuel, a diner with 40 seats. The next section of Nevada Road began on the other side of town. The Sierra Nevada began and the road changed. Graded, sometimes paved, properly engineered. The Packard climbed without difficulty, the temperature gauge dropping. Alkali dust blew off the hood in the first real wind in weeks. The Sacramento Valley opened below the descent. Green, irrigated. Roads built for the loads that actually used them. For the first time in 3,000 miles, Drury sat back against the leather and said nothing for 45 minutes. On September 6, 1919, San Francisco Bay appeared over the last California hills. The Packard had run 62 days and 3,251 miles. Drury closed the last ledger and set it on the seat beside him. The convoy reached San Francisco on September 6th. No ceremony, a small crowd watching from the sidewalk. The city smelled like fog and salt water and something close to normal. The Pacific was where the map said. Drury sat in the parked Packard and held the closed ledger for 3 minutes. 6 notebooks, 230 incidents, 9 vehicles lost. The road had won every argument it made. He had written them all down. The observer report was filed 3 weeks after arrival. It documented road conditions, failure patterns, and one conclusion stated plainly. Whether anyone in a position to act on it would do so was a different question. The report was received, read, and filed in the Army Records Archive in Washington. The Lincoln Highway stayed exactly as the convoy had found it. Malcolm Drury returned to Camp Meade, and the ledgers went into the vault. 37 years later, Eisenhower signed the Federated Highway Act. $25 billion, 41,000 miles. The Nevada alkali flat graded and paved for 80,000 pounds. The staff Packard was retired from Army service before the decade was out, and Malcolm Drury's name is not in the legislation. The road does the remembering. If these road stories are what you want to keep watching, subscribe to the channel. More cars, more roads, more lives lived behind a steering wheel that meant something. And if you ever drove a road that the map said existed, but the ground disagreed, tell us in the comments. What road? Where it took you. The cars remember everything. So do the people who drove them.